Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Brown Overboard. Food is something that is very important. Where is your next meal coming from? What will your next meal be? How do you gather the supplies that you need to survive? These are things that are different for everyone, pretty much. And it is very different depending on your lifestyle and where you live. Living in Alaska, growing up in the bush, it was very much like it used to be in the olden days, where you had to secure your own wood, water, and meat. You had to get the supplies that you needed to survive. Now, I remember my dad talking about how when he first went to Alaska, he was under the misguided assumption that there must be a store nearby somewhere, right? Because I would wager just about every individual listening to the sound of my voice right now, if they wanted to, could just run down to the local 7-Eleven or convenience store or whatever was near you. Most places have 24-hour places that you can go and purchase what you need. And even if you don't have that, there's definitely going to be like a local store somewhere. However, growing up in the bush of Alaska, not so much. We had to gather our supplies and take them with us. We also hunted and fished for a majority of our food. And cooking is something that is a part of everyone's life. Even if you're an individual that doesn't cook and you constantly just order out or go to restaurants or you have a private chef or whatever the case may be, cooking is still a major part of your existence. You just don't realize how much it is because you're not directly involved in doing the cooking. Or you're somebody that loves to cook or just has to cook because it's cheaper. Or you're somewhere where you're not afforded the opportunities to just order out or go to restaurants. Now, when I was growing up, a lot of our meals were cooked on an open fire. A lot of our meals were cooked simply by starting a fire in the safe fire pit and cooking that way. Now, you can cook on an open fire very simplistically. You can just take a fish and stick a stick through it and hold it over an open fire, which is probably the first way I learned to cook something. That was probably the first meal I ever cooked, was just taking a fish on a stick and holding it over the flames till it was good and charred and then eating that. Or you can get super fancy. Now, you can cook just about any meal on an open fire that you could cook with a stove. There are just ways that you have to do it. There's the setup involved. There's what utensils you have with you to be able to facilitate using that open fire in the same way that you would a regular cook stove. And then there's just a little bit of know-how, a little bit of gumption to be able to try to do things a little bit differently in that way, and some MacGyver skill to make it work. Some people would think that, if you're just cooking with an open fire, then it's impossible for you to cook a meal the same way you would on a stove. But that just isn't true. Now, a lot of people, they would just do the meat on a stick and hold it over a fire, or your basic like cowboy beans or a stew or something like that in a big pot over the fire. But there's a lot of things that you can cook over an open fire. And I myself have cooked a lot over open fires. And my mom, actually, she could bake a cake with an open fire. She could use an open fire as if it were an oven. And not just cakes, but cakes are one of the main things that come to mind when thinking about my mom baking on an open fire. And my dad was actually really good at setting up different kinds of campfires that facilitated different kinds of cooking. And actually, there was an episode of our show, Alaskan Bush People, that my mom baked a cake. I'm pretty sure that I think that made it into one of the episodes. I remember filming it. I remember it being something that we filmed because a lot of the producers, the film crew, they thought that was an unusual thing to do, which for us, it definitely wasn't. It was something Mom had done since I was a little kid. I think the majority of my birthday cakes actually were baked on an open fire. My mom baking it that way. And she came up with a lot of different ways to do things like that. I don't know actually if she learned that somewhere, if it was something that she picked up in her travels, if it was something that she read about, or if it was just a way that she came up with doing that on her own, if baking a cake on an open fire was just something that Mom came up with. But I know she was very good at it. She always could bake a cake on an open fire. She was definitely very good at doing that. And I actually, for a long time, so my mom cooked a lot. My mom cooked a lot of food. She actually makes a recipe that has been passed down. It's a family spaghetti, and it has been passed down for multiple generations of how to make this spaghetti. And she actually learned it from my dad's grandma, my great grandma, my dad's mom's mother. And this was a long time ago, before they moved to Alaska. And so I grew up with my mom making that spaghetti, and it was one of the first recipes I ever learned to make, actually, was the family spaghetti. And I can make it the same way that my mom made it, which my dad said was just like the spaghetti that he grew up with. So it's a family recipe that has been passed down, and definitely something that I intend to pass down to all my nieces and nephews and all the little ones, because it will live on for sure. It's a family recipe that is definitely going to continue. And there are multiple family recipes and things that they were stuff that my mom used to cook and cooked for a long time when we were little, or they were recipes that we just kind of picked up here and there. And then my dad, he was also a really good cook. So my dad and mom had two very distinct and different styles of cooking, however. So my mom, she is very much someone that likes to measure stuff out, right? She's very much someone that wants to do it by the book. She wants to measure it. She wants to make sure each thing is done correctly. She wants to ensure that it's not just a pinch of this and a dab of that. She wants to measure it out. Even if she doesn't exactly have written out the measurements, she knows them, right? She knows the measurements, and she is able to make it exactly the same every time. My dad, however, he was a wild card in the kitchen. Dad really liked to experiment with different ways to cook stuff. And some of the things my dad would cook were really good. Like, some of it turned out really well. Some of it was very, very, very good. Some of it, not so much. My dad made a few things that just didn't work. It didn't work at all, because he liked to experiment in the kitchen. And actually, my dad had, in his before life, he never cooked. He never really cooked. He never paid attention to anything being cooked. He liked to eat, and he was a big snack guy. Dad loved to snack throughout the day. He was never a big sweet tooth. Never liked a lot of candy. He was definitely a chocolate guy. I think I get that from my dad, because I'm very much a chocolate guy. I love just a good old school chocolate bar. And my dad was that way. He loved just plain chocolate. But that was really one of the only sweets that he would eat. But he loved to snack. He loved jerky. He loved walking around with crab legs in his pocket. He loved making his own jerky and deer bits and things like that, which he was also very good at, and smoking fish and all those things. A lot of smoked fish. My dad had his own barbecue recipe that I still make, and he made some killer hot sauce. My dad loved hot sauce. And his was more a hot sauce than a salsa, though made kind of like I guess that's sort of the same thing, but not really. Because my dad, he also learned how to make salsa or hot sauce when he was in Mexico. Long time ago, because my dad traveled down into old Mexico and through the deserts, and even lived in a thatch roof hut that he built on a beach in Veracruz for a little while, which he said, I'm getting off subject here, but he said that was really nice during the day, and it was beautiful and gorgeous, and he loved it. But that at night it was like a horror movie, because he said all these giant spiders would come out at night, and they were, I guess, just humongous, and were a crazy amount of them. But while he was down there, he picked up some recipes, and one of the things he learned to make was a hot sauce. And then he would experiment with it, and he'd tweak a little thing here and there throughout the years. And my dad made two kinds of this hot sauce that we grew up with. And it was actually one of the last things my dad ever cooked. before he passed was his famous hot sauce. And he made it two ways. He made it super hot, almost too hot to eat, and inedible. It was so nuclear hot. That's how my dad made hot sauce. It was something that you could just barely dip the corner of a chip in and eat, and it was horrendously warm, very, very hot. Because my dad, he liked to dip like chips and meat and stuff into the hot sauce, but he wasn't so much like scoop it up and eat the tomatoes and onions and all the stuff that was in it. He just liked to dip in the juice of the hot sauce, and so he made it very, very powerful. And my dad taught me how to make that, which I still of course make. And then he did some barbecue, which was really good. My dad was very good at making barbecue. And then my mom, she is just really good with any recipe that she tries to make. She can just take something out of a cookbook and make it really well, or she just makes it on her own and her own style in her own way. And for the longest time, I have been trying to convince my mom to help me write a cookbook. She has so many recipes and all the family recipes, and I've been trying for the longest time to get them all written down and to put together a cookbook, because I think that would be really cool. It's something that I've talked about a little bit. I think I talked about it on the show. I've talked about it online. I may have even mentioned it on the podcast before, because I just think it would be really cool. And there's a lot of family recipes. And how awesome would that be to like give the next generation an actual cookbook from the family, as opposed to just passing down the recipes themselves. Now, I myself, I love to cook. I love it. I have found that I have a natural knack for cooking. I seem to be, according to everyone that's ever eaten my food, I seem to be ridiculously good at cooking. I seem to be very, very, very good at cooking. I'm not going to say I don't try, because I do try to cook well, but it's also, it's not effortless. That's the wrong way to say it, but I just seem to have a natural skill at cooking, and I love doing it. I love working in the kitchen. I really, it's one of my happy places is fiddling around in the kitchen. And I enjoy doing that stuff. I like messing around with the spices and the herbs and the different kinds of ingredients. And I make all kinds of stuff. Like I said, one of the first things, probably the first thing I ever cooked, was just a fish on a stick over an open fire. And I've come a long way since then. And I, in recent times, have started actually cataloging all the different recipes that I've made. And so there are a couple different ways that I like to do recipes. The first way is just the family recipes that I've learned, right? So I have the family recipes. I got a lot of them locked away, and I've started writing them out myself, because it's nigh on impossible to get my mom to write down a recipe. I think in 15 years or more of me pestering mom to write down her recipes, she's given me like 4, I think, of them. So I, from memory, have been writing down as many of the recipes as I possibly can of all the ones that I've learned. And another interesting thing is that different members of the family kind of learn different recipes or are better at making those recipes. So I've gone to the different, like Gaby, he makes something that is called Gaby's casserole. It used to be, I forget what the name of it was, but we started calling it Gaby's casserole just because he loved it so much. And he kind of took that on where he would always be the one that made it. But it is actually a family recipe that was passed down, and I forget where that one actually came from, but it's been around for a long time. And so Gaby's really good at that, and he's supplying me that recipe. And then Noah loves like the goulash that my mom always makes. Anytime you talk food with Noah, he's always going to mention the goulash, and so he actually has that recipe that I'm getting, because that's not one that I've made a lot. I specialize in the family spaghetti and then several other recipes when it comes to the family ones. But then the other way that I will do a lot of my cooking is I will find a recipe of something I want to cook, or something that I think is interesting or off the wall or comes from somewhere, and I will try to sit down and make that to spec the best I can, making it exactly like what the recipe calls for, right? Measuring every little thing out exactly perfectly and stirring it exactly the way they tell you to. And I will do that until I've made it the best I think it can be. which usually doesn't take many times of doing it for me. I'm pretty good at cooking. I used to be like real like modest about it and be like, oh yeah, I can cook. I mess around in the kitchen. But these days I just say it. I'm just like, yes, I can cook. I'm a very good cook, because just everyone that eats anything I've ever made is always like, saying how good of a cook I am. So these days I just embrace it, and yes, I can cook. I can cook really well. So after I have worked with that recipe and done it the way you're supposed to, and made it as good as I can in that way, I will then start tweaking things. I will then start changing things, because there's a lot of recipes I've messed with where, like, traditionally it tells you to do one thing or to do a certain thing this way. Like, for example, there was one sauce I was making, and it said that you're supposed to incorporate the ingredients together and mix it and then put it in the saucepan and heat it up slowly. And I've found, in my own opinion, that it was actually better to add a little more water than they said you were supposed to the pan first, warm that up, and then add your ingredients into the warm water while stirring and heat it up as you add the ingredients, because it just seemed to change the consistency of the sauce versus when you were mixing everything on the cabinet and then putting it in the saucepan and heating it up. At least that's the way I felt about it. And then other things, I'll change an ingredient here or there. Sometimes I'll swap something out because it's something that I'm not very fond of. Or sometimes I just find that adding a little lemon zest, like, brings something else out in it. I'll add something that I think works better, like I'll substitute an ingredient, or I'll just add ingredients to it. And sometimes subtract ingredients. But that's cooking, right? That's what you do with cooking. And I just take it into the point now of, like, writing those things down. Because used to, I would just make it. I would enjoy making it. I'd make the thing and make it as good as I could. And then I might return to that recipe later if I wanted to just, have dinner one time and make the thing. But now I've gotten really into the idea of making a cookbook. I've gotten into the idea of actually making it a thing. In the past, it was primarily just a thing I wanted to do for the family, and it was something that I wanted to do with my mom, and it was primarily for my mom. It was my mom's cookbook, is what it was. It has now turned into my cookbook, and there will be a chapter in it dedicated to the family recipes. And Mom will have a chapter in the book that will be in with the family recipes, the family chapter. But the rest of it is just going to be my cookbook. And I've cataloged, I want to say, around 26 or 27 recipes at the moment that I have. And I say cataloged, I've got way more than that. I've got a lot of recipes that I have worked with over the years, and a lot of family recipes. But as far as the ones that I've actually gotten written down and that I've actually figured out, like, all the ingredients and the measurements, and I've actually sat down and started writing, or have finished writing in some cases, the description of how you're supposed to cook it. So I'm up to about 26 or 27 recipes that I have ready to go into the book. And I've already started formulating the book and how it's going to be laid out, and writing out, like, the history of the different recipes and whatnot. And I'm looking forward to the step of the cookbook where I get to make the stuff and then take photos of it, because that's going to be fun. Because you have to keep making the stuff to get it exactly right and get down the recipe as you do it. But then getting my good camera, because I got a really good camera, and I can and I've always messed around with photography, so I can take that after I make it look as pretty as possible, which I like to do anyway, and then take the photos and incorporate that into the cookbook. I just think it's really cool. Even if nobody wants to read it, even if nobody ever buys one of the cookbooks, just giving it to the different members of the family will be awesome. Just having the cookbook on my own shelf, I think, will be cool, because I'm just into cooking, and I have been for a long time, and I've just gotten more and more into it. It's not something that has ever fizzled out with me, or that I've ever gotten to a point where it's like, I don't want to walk into another kitchen. I can't look at another stove. Keep the spoons away from me. It's always, for me, it's just gotten more and more. The more I cook, the more I want to, the more I enjoy it, the more recipes I find, and then branching out into other styles of cuisine. Like, I do a Peruvian rice pudding, because I had rice pudding once and I really enjoyed it. I was actually in Aruba, and I got to spend a little time there, which was very cool 1010 would do again. Highly recommend Aruba. It was fantastic. And there was a place there that did, they made Peruvian food, and it was authentic. And they had a Peruvian rice pudding that was amazing. It was insanely amazing. It was delicious. And so I had to learn that recipe. I had to figure out how to make it, and then of course make it in my own way. And I actually came up with a recipe adjacent to the Peruvian rice pudding that I call a post-apocalyptic rice pudding, because it's made out of all ingredients that can last like forever. Because you can get the like powdered milk that will last a very, very, very long time. Rice, of course, lasts basically forever. And all the ingredients that go into it with the different spices and the raisins and whatnot are all dried ingredients. And so it's something that you can have all the ingredients for it in a pack that will last years and years and years. So that's why I call it post-apocalyptic rice pudding. And it's very good. I could probably talk a whole podcast just about the rice pudding, but I digress. So there's a lot of different recipes that I have enjoyed making and that I love to make. I do a baked chicken that is one of my favorite things to cook. It's super simple. It's a very simple recipe, but it's just fantastic. It's delicious. It's something that is an amazing meal and something that I can just eat over and over. Now, of course, my favorite food, anyone who knows anything about me knows that my favorite food, hands down, all day long, Dungeness crab. I can never get enough Dungeness crab. Even if I have just eaten 14 of them, I'll have another one and I'll eat it again tomorrow, because Dungeness crab is one thing that I can eat over and over and over, and I'm always hungry for. And it's unfortunately something that I can't really get at the moment. It's something that is not that readily available in northern Washington. It's something that is not that easy to come by, and when you are able to find it, it's incredibly expensive, which, as I've said before on the podcast and all over the place, I have eaten millions of dollars of seafood in my life. Millions and millions. And I have a bunch of different ways that you can cook Dungeness crab as well. Have not gotten to mess with lobster much, but I think that would be really fun to make, because I've had lobster Benedict a few times. It's like eggs Benedict, but with lobster, and that was very good, and would love to get to toy around with making that. And then there's a bunch of egg recipes that I do as well. So with the cookbook, I want to make it where there's like the family chapter with all that stuff, and I'm gonna do like the dessert chapter and whatnot, and all the, like some simple recipes, and then I'll do the sauces, and of course Dad's hot sauce is gonna be in there. And it's something that I'm just into. It's something that I think is really cool. And food is something that is always going to be a part of your life. Like I was saying before, it's something that is always going to be a part of your life. We're always either currently eating, planning our next meal, going to get the ingredients for a meal, in some way on our way to the next meal. Because food is just that part of life. And whether you're somebody that is living subsistence, or you just go to the grocery store, or you got other people cooking for you or whatever, food will always be a part of your life. And I think everyone should know how to cook. I think that even if you're a billionaire that doesn't even need to look at a kitchen, you should still know how to cook. I think that if you're somebody that doesn't know how to cook, one, you're missing out. You are missing out on the magic of being able to make a meal and being able to make your own meal. And I don't just throw the word magic around lightly, because to me it is very magical to be in the kitchen and mix all these ingredients together, say the magic words, and boom, it's something that you've created that is amazing and wonderful. Secondly, I think that it is a skill everyone should have, because it is definitely something that will teach you patience and consistency and caring, because it makes you care for the thing that you're making. There is no way to force a meal to be good. There's no way to force it to be good. And there's no amount of money you can throw at something to make you skilled in doing a thing, right? And food cooking is just like that. And we all eat. We all eat to survive. And I just think that it's a waste if you don't know how to cook. I think everyone should know how to cook. I think that it's a skill that everyone should have, and something that if you do try it out, I think that everyone would really enjoy cooking. Now, maybe you won't take to it the same way I do, because obviously, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about cooking. I enjoy it. It's a fantastic use of your time, in my opinion, because I eat, so I want to be able to cook. But even if you don't enjoy it the way I do, even if you're not as crazy about it as I am, I think you would still enjoy the process of learning how to cook. And another thing about it is the ability to provide an awesome, cool, wonderful, super tasty meal for someone that you care about. To be able to provide that to someone. Because when you create something, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's a table or a chair or a meal, part of your spirit goes into that, in my opinion. Not to get too hippie about it, but I think that that is true with art and with food. And when you share that with someone, it is something that you are sharing that you can't share in any other way. When you have created something for someone to eat that is very enjoyable and pleasant and nourishing, you're sharing something that is just very special and not something that you can share in any other way than to do that. And I really enjoy being able to do that. I love to cook a good meal for someone that I care about. And I love to see someone really enjoy a meal that I have made. And another thing that I really like to do, because I enjoy so much seeing someone enjoy something that I have created in that way, and someone having that kind of culinary experience with something that I have made, I love the plating aspect. Like, if you get into cooking, it's impossible not to get into the plating, because that is a very important part of cooking, is to make it look really nice on the plate. No, I don't get so pretentious with it. Maybe I do get a little bit pretentious with it, because I do have to make it just so. And I really like making it look cool and making it look, pretty and neat, and where it's a feast for the eyes as well as the stomach. I think that it is really cool the way that you can do those things. And there's just little things that you can do, like the way that I will slice, let's say I take a half an avocado and I slice it super thin, julienne style, which is just strips, and then line it up a certain way so that it flows and fans out across the plate. And I'd have to show it to you for you to get what I'm saying, I think. But it's a really cool way to do it. And you could just chop up the half an avocado and throw it onto the plate. But you don't get the same experience. You don't get the same vibe. You don't get the same look from it as when you put in those little touches. And like, I did something recently where I was doing something with, I think it was some kind, it was zucchini, I think. And I cut it, and I was just going to toss it on the plate, just cut in circles. But then I took the circles and I cut them in half, and then put like a slit halfway down each half, and then feathered them together and set those on the plate so that they kind of stood up and were made into like little star-shaped symbols, which I thought was cool. And it's just little fun things like that you can do. Because you can like get real origami into some of the things, into some of the ways that you can make it. And I've got into feathering like tomatoes and stuff and making little things out of them, which is really fun. It's really fun. And growing up with those kinds of experiences, I think we just really, the experiences of having to acquire what you were going to eat, having to go hunt for your food or fish for your food, and it being such an experience, and having to build your own open fire oven and things like that. I think it just gave me an appreciation for food that other people might not have, because of not just, scarcity of certain things and ingredients and how difficult it could be to get it, but just the experience of watching my mom or dad cook that way, or of being the guy that was doing that kind of cooking. And I know on the show, there were definitely a lot of times where like we were in a hurry, or people were just slapping stuff in a pan. Like a go-to for Bear is like to eat Spam He likes to take Spam and just cut it into cubes, throw it into a pan, put some like whole tomatoes in there or minced tomatoes, maybe a jalapeno, and then just stir that up in a skillet on the fire. Pretty sure that made it into the show a few times. So that is one way to go about it. But there are definitely a lot of times where I would make full Thanksgiving dinners on an open fire and that kind of stuff, which is another thing I really enjoy, is doing a full Thanksgiving dinner. There is just a real sense of accomplishment when you make a Thanksgiving dinner from start to finish. And there again, something that I have done with the Thanksgiving dinner is that I started out doing it where I would just make a Thanksgiving dinner with the ingredients. Like I would just use the canned cranberry sauce, right? I would use the boxed stuffing. I would just use those kinds of things, and I would make that as best I could to make the Thanksgiving dinner. And of course, always cooking my own turkey. Now, I have gotten really good at cooking a turkey. I can cook a mean bird. And once I perfected there's still always room for improvement, but my bird's pretty good. So once I perfected or got it to a point where it's basically perfect, the turkey, I then moved on to the next thing and started making that as the best I could, which I think was the mashed potatoes was the next thing I went for, because I love a whipped mashed potato. I love garlic whipped mash. And there are definitely some specific ways that I make my mashed potatoes, because there are a lot of ways that other people make their mashed potatoes that I do not agree with. I get very passionate about my mashed potatoes, and I could go on for a while about that. And then I moved on to like the cranberry sauce, which I make from scratch. You know, if you're in a pinch for time, you can always go back to the can, and if you can't get like the fresh cranberries and things like that, but I like to make it from scratch. And I really enjoy doing it. And not only that, but there are several different ways that I'll make it. So I have like a Christmas cranberry sauce, and I have a Thanksgiving cranberry sauce, and they are different. And then the stuffing, I'm still perfecting the stuffing, making that 100% myself. And one of the reasons I'm still perfecting it is because I'm not just making my own stuffing like with the seasoning and everything. I bake my own bread for the stuffing. So there's a whole process that goes into making the stuffing. And I just enjoy doing it. And to be able to sit back on a Thanksgiving dinner and look at a bird that you made, that you cooked, that is perfect, golden brown on the skin and just juicy, because turkey is a delicate bird. It's very easy to make it too dry, but there are a lot of ways that you can combat that. And to make a crisp, juicy, perfect bird, and you have homemade cranberry sauce that you made from scratch, and you have stuffing that you made, that you actually baked the bread that you made it from, and you used herbs that you grew in your own garden, and it's a different sense of accomplishment. And then you throw those mashed potatoes on there, and the gravy, I am the master of gravy. I can make better gravy than I think anyone. I would put my gravy against Gordon Ramsay's gravy. It is that good. At least I think it's that good. And I think everyone that's ever had some of my turkey dinner with the gravy would probably agree. Now, I've never personally had Gordon Ramsay's gravy, so I would have to try his next to mine to actually be able to say that. So, Gordon Ramsay, if you're listening to this, I challenge you to a gravy cook-off. Let's compare our gravies, because I think mine's going to win. Not to be cocky, but it's very good. I'm very good at making gravy. I am making myself kind of hungry. I was saying earlier, I'm not somebody that gets crazy hungry a lot, but all this talk of food makes me want to dive into the kitchen and make something to eat, because I'm getting a little bit hungry. And it's funny too, that more than getting hungry for cooking, I just get where I want to cook, where I want to make something, right? Where I'll just be like, I really just want to get in the kitchen and make something. I could see how some people could make a career out of doing that, how some people could be where that's just what they want to do with their life. They want to be a chef. They want to cook. They want to make food. Now, it's not something that I'm going to or would want to dedicate my life to in that way, but it is definitely a major part of my life because, like I said, I eat and I love to cook. But getting back on the Thanksgiving dinner, I think that is a cool one to do because it's a very traditional meal. It comes with a lot of different dishes that you have to perfect and that you have to master and make just so. And it all has to come together in a way that complements each thing, right? It can't be something where you've made it all slap happy and it doesn't come together. It's got to complement each other thing so that all of these items work together. Another thing I think that has given me a real appreciation for food in that way is a little bit of the way that not a lot of the stuff was easy to come by when I was growing up. Like a lot of this food that we had, it was canned goods for certain stuff. It was dry goods for other things. And then it was stuff that we could just go get in the wild. It was fish and deer and seafood and all of those things, which has its pros and cons. But I tell you, I think I have just about ruined myself in some ways with the cooking. For one, Alaska cooking will just do that to you. It will run you for other cooking because of how fresh everything is. And you don't notice that. And definitely something that I didn't realize I was taking for granted, but I was, because you don't notice it as much until you're somewhere else, until you like order some salmon from a restaurant. You don't realize the major difference between pulling a salmon out of the ocean and eating it like 20 minutes after you pull it out of the ocean versus going to a restaurant and ordering it and getting it that way, because there's definitely a difference in just the freshness of the meal. And then the other way that I've ruined myself is a lot of times I'm just a better cook. I'm sorry, but I'm just a better cook. I cook a really mean hamburger. I've got a specific, very particular way that I make hamburgers. And the last time I went somewhere, the last time I was driving a good ways, I think I was going down to Los Angeles for an acting thing that I was doing, and I hate to fly, so I just drove down, and I stopped at a burger place and had a burger. It just did not live up to my burgers. It just didn't. And I've had some really good burgers at some places, but even then, it's not my burger. And I think that's a good sign that you're a really good cook when that happens, when like you just can't get a restaurant burger that lives up to yours, that is as good as your burger is. And yes, that's definitely going to be in the cookbook. The burger recipe will definitely be in there. And it is strange too, because like thousands of years ago, everyone realized, I think, more just how much more food is a major part of life. And I think a lot of people take that for granted now. I know there are a lot of people that don't, because there are definitely a lot of places in the world that are not as fortunate in that as where we are, as where I am. Definitely are not as fortunate as the way that I grew up, because the way I grew up, being able to just go out and secure your food in that way and it be so abundant and you having that opportunity, that I definitely never took for granted, because I always knew that there are places where people aren't able to do that. And I've always appreciated the fact that I grew up being able to do that. And even now, I very much appreciate the fact that the opportunities are there to be able to get what you need in that way. And you don't have to worry about food scarcity in that way. I think more people these days probably worry about the inconvenience of having to get their food or figure out what they're going to cook for dinner, as opposed to the very real reality that a lot of people throughout history have faced, and a lot of people still today face, of the actual getting of the food, and just how prevalent the possibility of not having that is. So never take your meals for granted, guys. Never take your meals for granted. Appreciate the fact that you are able to enjoy another meal. I have always appreciated the fact that I had another meal to eat, and that I was able to cook, and I had the opportunities to do the things that I have been able to do when it comes to having food and having that abundance in your life, which I've been very, very blessed with in my life. Like I said previously, and have said a lot, I've eaten millions of dollars of seafood in my life. I have been very fortunate. I was very blessed to grow up with two parents that really enjoyed food and cooking and imparted that on me I remember my mom teaching me how to make pancakes. I think that was one of the first things that she taught me how to make, like from scratch, and was something that I'll never forget, being a little guy and mom showing me how to mix the batter and then how to pour it in, and how to use the spatula to move it around so it doesn't stick. And then dad taught me how to toss the pancake with the pan, how to do it without the spatula, because my dad was really good at that. And he didn't think it counted to only get one flip. He was like, no, you got to get a couple flips on the pancake. So I remember my dad teaching me how to do that, and how much fun that was. And I remember a lot of Christmases working with my mom in the kitchen, helping peel the potatoes or helping stir this or that. And something that my dad really loved to do, because he grew up doing this, like when his mom would cook spaghetti. So it takes a little while to cook the spaghetti sauce. And one thing that makes our family spaghetti sauce different than like store-bought spaghetti sauce, or the way a lot of people make it, is that we cook it down, right? We don't just cook it all saucy. You have to start with like whole tomatoes, and then you cook that down, and you let that cook down to a pretty good extent, and then you just keep adding a little more water to it, and you keep cooking it down, and it gets a real, like, not tomato paste, but almost a tomato paste consistency. And my dad, when he was a little kid, he said that he would drive his mom crazy because he would always grab like half a loaf of bread, and he would go in there and he would dip the bread in the tomato sauce and make little sandwiches out of it. And he would do that till like there was almost nothing left. He said his mom would just about have to make two pans of spaghetti sauce, one just for him to make sandwiches and one for her to make the spaghetti. And dad did that forever. He would drive mom crazy doing that, because we usually weren't able to make 2 pans of spaghetti sauce. But dad would come in and just sop up the sandwiches, and he would do that. And then he taught us to do that. So I remember being a little kid going into the kitchen and just driving mom nuts, because also mom had a lot of little ones and dad coming in trying to do that. So there wasn't a lot of sauce left a lot of times when we would do this. And I'll never forget, like I would go in there, and I'd end up being like one of the last people to get to do it. And I would go back for like a second one, and like I would try to sneak around mom to dip it in there. And then some of my siblings and I came with the idea of, okay, you distract mom, I'll get to the stove and get some of the sauce for everybody. All in good fun, of course. And though it drove mom a little crazy, she also always thought it was super cute. And loved the fact that we loved it so much, because it was really good. And it's another reason why I'm so proud to be able to make the family spaghetti the way that I can, and to be able to cook it where it tastes just like my mom's, and hers tasted just like my dad's grandma, my great grandma's. I think that's really cool. And that's another facet of being able to cook, is being able to pass those things down through the generations. And I don't think that stuff should be lost. Like if you're listening to this right now and you have family recipes, you have someone in your family that's always cooked, or that has always cooked the family recipes, or cooked things that you grew up with or that you really loved, go get that recipe. Go learn that recipe. Don't just get the recipe from them, cook it with them. Let them teach you how to make that. It'll be a great experience for the two of you, something that you'll get to take with you forever. And as well, something that you can share with the people in your life that you love. Because that's one thing about food, is it brings us all together. And it's something that you get to share with the people you care about. And even on the nights where you're just making a meal for yourself, it can definitely brighten things up a little bit to have a good home-cooked meal that you're able to provide for yourself or for the people that you care about. And even if you're making a meal and it's just for you, don't forget to plate it, because it does make a big difference, even if you're alone, even if it's just for you, when you make that plate look all pretty and you set it down and you get to enjoy that meal and have that reassurance that you made that, and you get to have that little moment of pride in what you've created, and you get to enjoy it. All right, guys. So get out there, get in your kitchen, get to cooking. Y'all guys have a good one. Stay safe. Respect the danger. And I'll see you next time for another episode of Brown Overboard.